Okay, this lesson tutorial covers 2 geography lessons worth of work. So don't feel you have to complete these tasks in one geography lesson. They should take anything up to maybe an hour and a half. So I'd suggest is you complete a few and then save a few for your next geography lesson. So what are we looking at today? Well, we have so far looked at a range of problems across the planet as identified by Sir David Attenborough in his film. And we've given each of them some headings, and you've built up some notes based on the video of these problems. What we're now going to do is just select out of these some of what we call, or what might be considered to be the most significant of the problems. And today, the main skill is going to be about locating where the problem is happening. Okay, so let's just look at the main part of today's lesson. Okay, we're going to start with climate change as our first significant problem. Okay, now what we've got here is in the issue of climate change is basically the fact that in the case of this idea itself, sometimes people get the word climate change and global warming confused. Climate change is to do with the climate changing. Now that could be global warming, but it actually could be global cooling. So for example, an ice age is global cooling. Currently though, the evidence is strongly suggesting that the planet is warming, as shown by this map. So we are, as a planet, experiencing global warming, and certainly have been so for at least the last 50 years, if not probably the last couple of centuries. Now, what this map shows you is areas that have warmed up substantially in the last 50 years. Okay, so we just have a little look at this map before we answer the question. This map shows you up here in the Arctic regions of northern Canada and northern Russia, as well as the Greenland and the Arctic itself, that the average temperature has increased by up to 4 degrees, and we know that because it's red, and we can match that with the key. At the opposite end of that, we can see this small area in Antarctica that's actually slightly cooler, by up to 1 degree cooler than the long-term average. That's in the last 50 years. We can see that most of Africa, not all of Africa, but most of Africa, the northern part of South America, all of Europe and Asia, and the northern part of North America that I'm showing you here, they've all warmed up between 1 to 2 degrees. We can see that the oceans, most of the ocean areas, have warmed up somewhere between 0.2 degrees and 0.5 degrees by the cream and yellow colors. And we can see the southern area of the planet, near Antarctica, is roughly between minus 0.2 and plus 0.2. Okay, so what color is doing, so this first question, what does this map show you? Well, it shows you that different colors, it shows you that the different areas of the planet that have warmed up to different amounts. So it helps us be able to see which areas of the planet have warmed up the most in the last 50 years. The second part of this question, how does it show this? Well, it's showing it by using color. And why does it show it this way? Well, to answer that question, I would like you to think about why does it use red to show the areas that have warmed up the most and blue to show the areas that have warmed up the least? So why is that color being chosen specifically? Now, the final task here, describe the pattern of global warming over the last 50 years. Well, to do that, you need to actually know how to describe a pattern, okay? And there's a little tricks to do that I'm going to teach you right now, and I'd like you to write in the answer to question number 3, okay? So, before you go ahead and write anything, just listen to this next bit of my lesson and then pause it at that point and then try to write it yourself in as much detail as you can. Now, you'll notice a second ago when I was describing what we could see on the map that I was talking about how red is being used to show this area here, and we can see that this area here therefore is up to 4 degrees warmer than it was than the long-term average. Okay, so the the 1951 to 1978 average, what we call the baseline. So how would I describe that? Well, the best way to describe a pattern is always go with something that's the most, and then look at the second, and then go down to the least areas in the last part of your answer. And if I was to pick the area that's warmed up the most, I would say clearly it's the top of the planet, but that's not good enough. We know the top of the planet is called the Arctic. So instead of saying the top of the planet, I would say the Arctic has warmed up by up to 4 degrees in the last 50 years. As a matter of fact, I would go even more than that. I can see this top bit of Russia, an area we call Siberia, is part of that area that's warmed up to 4 degrees. I can also see the top of Greenland up here, and the northern part of Canada and Alaska, which is this area over here, have also warmed up by 4 degrees. So I would write that down. I would actually make sure I'm naming some areas of the planet and giving the amount that they've warmed up. Now let's work down to the orange. It is fair to say that all of Europe has warmed up between 1 and 2 degrees, because all of Europe is that color. It would not be true to say all of Africa has warmed up by 1 to 2 degrees, the orange, because the southern bit hasn't. So if I was describing Africa, I would say the northern part of Africa, or I'd say all of Africa except the south, has warmed up between 1 to 2 degrees. And I'd have to do a similar thing for South America, which is this continent here. If I was talking about Asia, which is this continent over here, I could say most of Asia, except this bottom part, which is Southeast Asia, has warmed up by 1 to 2 degrees. Whereas Southeast Asia, which is this region here, is obviously this color here, between 0.5 and 1 degrees. Okay, so I'd like you to go around each continent, giving me a full descriptive sentence that tells me how much each continent has warmed up. Remember, don't give overall statements about whole continents, because most continents have got exceptions. You can talk about the oceans as well. This is the Pacific Ocean. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Indian Ocean here. This is the Southern Ocean around Antarctica. And make sure you talk about the amounts that they're warming up. Okay, so if you follow that, you should be able to write quite a detailed description that covers the planet, that identifies areas that warmed up the most and areas that warmed up a lot less so. Okay, so that's part one. I would pause it now and make sure you've written an answer to these 3 tasks. Okay, the second part of this lesson is climate change, who in the world? Okay, so in this lesson part, we're thinking about, we know where in the world the planet's warming up the most. What we're now going to look at is who is the most responsible. Now, as you're going to learn later on in this topic, carbon dioxide emissions, that's CO2, that's this gas here, are the most common gases associated with the planet warming. And CO2 is something that is emitted by a range of things. So I've said up here, one of the main causes of global warming is the release of a gas into the atmosphere called carbon dioxide. This gas is released by humans burning fossil fuels. The map below shows the countries most guilty of releasing these gases into the atmosphere. So here you can see a map of the world and the billions of tons of carbon dioxide released by different countries. Okay? We've now got a question here that says, describe the changes you can see from 1751 to today in the different countries that are releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. Does this change over time? Your answer should try to include some figures as well as key dates when you notice things change. So how do you answer this? Well, you need to click on this link. Okay. And when we click on this link, we are going to get an interactive map of the world. There we are. And what's really great about this map is we can see back in 1751 that we had no data. We don't know how much gas has been released by anybody. Or actually, we have some countries where we can see that virtually none was being given. Now, if we just start playing forward in time, we can see it's starting to increase. Now, as we go forward in time, we will see some countries with more data appearing. We just pause it around about now, 1847. We can see that the United Kingdom was releasing 103 million tons of carbon dioxide, and it was the world's worst at the time. We can see that because its color is slightly higher. So if I hover over it, you'll see down here, this got highlighted. If I hover over this color, we can see these countries were giving off 50 million. So back in 1847, we can see the data up here. Britain was the worst, and we were emitting over 103 million tons. Well, let's go forward in time. Let's go to 1900. You can see as the countries start to appear, it means we're getting some data. So America now joins as a polluting country. We're now 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940. Let's just stop it at 1950. We can now see that the world's worst is the United States. 2.54 billion tons of carbon dioxide was being emitted. We in Britain, there we are, 500. That's Germany, 510. Lots of the world still not really having either no data or very low amount. So we can keep rolling forward in time. And gradually we can see the color, the map changing all the way to today's amount. Well, almost 2 years ago. And we can see today, China, 10.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide. The United States, 5.42. So China is the world's worst emitter of carbon dioxide today. We can see some other countries. So what are you going to be doing in this task? You should talk about some key dates. Start with 1751. Pick out Britain at the beginning and how much we emitted. Then pick out another few dates. Maybe go for 1851. Maybe go for 1950. And then maybe go for 2018. And pick out the worst countries, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 that you notice giving off huge amounts of CO2, and give me the amounts. And I would also pick out from the map areas that are not responsible at all. So when you look at this map, which parts of the world are emitting almost no amount, no CO2. Okay, so that's all of your tasks for this lesson. There is another tutorial that will follow, which will allow you to start answering some of these other questions, which I would like you to tackle next lesson.